The Republican Party specifically, trying to hack its way out of a wilderness of its own making, trying to make connections with, trying to reintroduce themselves to a whole swath of the American electorate who thinks that the Republican Party is ick.
Now, there's a hilarious episode on Seinfeld. Any Seinfeld fans? Where Jerry admits that he loves Asian women, but he frets and he worries. He says, is it racist to like a certain race? So it is with trepidation that I'd like to express my admiration today for the romance of the Latin culture. I'm a great fan of
Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky then went on, in the same speech just moments later, to read to the assembled crowd, which was the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, to read to them a Pablo Neruda love poem. Not a policy poem, not a poem about commerce or chambers, but rather a love poem to show his love of how romantic Latinos are. Latino business leaders who turned out to hear a policy address by a United States senator and instead got a love poem and his profession for the romantic love of Latinos. After the election, the Republican Party decided this year that one of its catastrophic failures, not just some little thing that needed to be tweaked, some little embarrassment that should be regretted, one of the structural problems that they have got that threatens their existence as a party that can compete nationally is the issue of Latino voters. How much Latino voters do not like the Republican Party. And so right after the election, within weeks of the election, they made a big show at their first big national Republican Party reinvention pageant. They made a big show of trying to fix what's wrong with their appeal to Latino voters. Republican congressmen got specific advice. They got a list of do's and don'ts from a group formed to try to make Latinos like Republicans more. The Hispanic Leadership Network encouraged Republican members of Congress to, quote, please consider these tonally sensitive messaging points as you discuss immigration. Don't use phrases like send them all back or electric fence or build a wall along the entire border. Don't use the word illegals or aliens. Don't use the term anchor baby. Don't characterize all Hispanics as undocumented or all undocumented as Hispanics. And I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, right, that a member of Congress, Republican members of Congress have to be told this, have to be told not to characterize all Hispanics in the United States as undocumented aliens or illegals. It is embarrassing to give and presumably to receive advice like this, but it is probably practical for the GOP. Even with all of that practical yet embarrassing advice, though, I am guessing that it never occurred to anybody trying to rebrand the Republican Party for a Latino audience. I'm guessing it never occurred to anybody that they might also need to directly tell Republican members of Congress to not use this word in public.
My father had a ranch. We used to hire 50 to 60 wetbacks and to pick tomatoes. You know, it takes two people to pick the same tomatoes now. It's all done by machine.
Who knew the tonally sensitive messaging points for the 2013 Congress should have said, don't use words like that. Not at a bar when you're drunk and feeling particularly racist, not at home, not with your buddies, not ever. Let alone in an interview into a microphone. But yet, that was Congressman Don Young speaking in an interview into a microphone with a radio station in his home state of Alaska. Didn't anybody ever tell you, sir, not to say that word? It never came up before? Everybody in your personal life who's heard you say that has been totally cool with that? Immediately upon saying that, Don Young did put out a statement saying that he meant no disrespect by it. The Anchorage Daily News noted that in that initial statement, Congressman Young, quote, stopped short of apologizing. Finally, late today, he did go back for another pass, and he did end up apologizing. Took a couple tries, but he finally got there. Also today, we learned that the great state of North Carolina has decided to get rid of the state's Office of Hispanic and Latino Affairs. They have this state office in North Carolina for good reason. Latinos are the state's fastest growing ethnic community by a mile. This office was designed to help the Latino community in North Carolina, which is growing so fast, help them have a say in policy decisions that affect them. It was where Hispanic residents, Spanish-speaking residents, went to get bilingual help during hurricanes and other natural disasters. North Carolina's Hispanic population grew by 111% between the years 2000 and 2010. And that is a fact that we know because it was put together in a report by the director of the North Carolina Office of Hispanic and Latino Affairs, which is the office that they are now closing. And the reason they are now closing it is because now North Carolina has a Republican governor. Governor Pat McCrory, elected just this past election, has decided that now that he's the governor there and there isn't a Democrat in the governor's office anymore, that Latino office has to go. The North Carolina Office of Hispanic and Latino Affairs was founded in 1998 when the governor was a Democrat named James Hunt. The office survived just fine for 14 years. For the 14 years that North Carolina had Democratic governors. But enter the first Republican governor in 14 years, Pat McCrory. 3 months after taking office, he closes it down. So that's Republican outreach to the fastest growing ethnic community in the state of North Carolina. That's how that goes. The Republican Party has a deep, deep problem, not an image problem, a deep problem with Latino voters. At base level, the real problem is not the Don Youngs of the world, although that's a problem. It's that Latino voters don't like what the Republican Party is offering. It doesn't like what the Republican Party is offering as politics. It doesn't like what the Republican Party is offering as policy. Look at Obamacare. If you ask Latinos support it by 57%. Republicans just marked their 39th attempt to repeal Obamacare. Republicans are dead set, die on a hill opposed to taxes being any part of bringing down the debt or the deficit. That's what they most want to be known for this year. While the proportion of Latinos who disagree with them, who say tax increases should be a part of debt reduction, is a whopping 83%. How about climate change, which Republicans denounce as a hoax? If you ask Latinos if climate change is a serious problem, 74% of Latinos say yes. Latinos support gun safety regulation. 62% of Latinos support a limit on high-capacity magazines. On the issue of abortion, it's 2/3 of Latinos who say that abortion should be legal. Ask Latinos about marriage equality for same-sex couples. A clear majority of Latinos say yes, they are in favor of that. At that Senator Rand Paul speech, the I love hot Latin culture, let me read you a love poem, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce speech. Before he got to the love poem, that speech was all about how he's sure that Latinos agree with him on abortion and same-sex marriage. He said he was sure they agreed with him. I mean, check the stereotype. That's what the stereotype says. He's totally wrong about that, no matter what the stereotype is. Latino voters do not agree with him or his party on those issues broadly. But he still wants the stereotype to fit, so why change it? He likes it. Part of the big story of the Republican Party in 2013 is going to be watching them try to bridge this gap, trying to fix this problem that they've got with Latino voters. This problem that if they cannot fix it, they can never win a national election. When the party released its formal autopsy of what they did so wrong in the last election, the headline conclusion was that the party said it would spend $10 million on minority outreach. And when they said minority, what they really meant was Hispanic and Latino. The word Hispanic appeared 99 times in this 97-page report. Once per page and then some. This is their absolute focus as a party. Well, today we also learned that one of the things we should expect from Republicans toward this aim is that they're working on new TV ads starring the chairman of the Republican Party that are aimed at rebranding the Republican Party for Latino voters. The basic idea has to be what? I mean, sorry about that whole racial slur thing from Don Young. Never mind that. We love you. Bienvenido. Thank you for picking our food. Thank you for picking our food? What? Yes, according to Media Matters reporting today, the Republican ad man who's making the ad at a New York politics conference yesterday said that the ad will feature RNC Chairman Reince Priebus, quote, reaching out to those Latin Americans who have come to the United States to help us build our country, to help harvest our food. Thanks for picking our food, Latinos. Love the Republican Party. This is the thing the Republican Party is supposedly working on hardest. And this is how it's going so far. Joining us now is the Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post, MSNBC political analyst Gene Robinson. Gene, it's very good to see you. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here, Rachel. But, I mean, where do we begin? You know, may I just say, Dios mío? I mean, where are we?
I have to say, my favorite part of all of this, I mean, Don Young is amazing. His first explanation was that he didn't know it was bad, which says, I mean, okay, you didn't know, but presumably that means you've been using this in other contexts, and nobody who you've ever spoken to has raised an eyebrow or told you that's a bad thing. Right. Then he came around and apologized. But you did see Republican leadership, other Republicans jump on Don Young and say that he had to apologize today. Is that a sign of progress?
Well, I suppose it's a sign of progress, but it doesn't get them very far because Don Young set them so far back. So really, they're just recovering a tiny bit of the ground that they might have lost earlier in the day. You know, let me just interpose a word about Rand Paul and the reading the Pablo Neruda poem to the Chamber of Commerce. Is he aware that Pablo Neruda was a communist? He was a great poet, one of the great poets of the 20th century, but he was so far from Rand Paul or anything Rand Paul would ever believe in. But of course, I doubt that Rand Paul understands that. I imagine many people in his audience might have.
Actually, the Rand Paul thing, I feel like it's important because it's a perfect microcosm of what's going on. He's there giving what's billed as a policy address to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, so to business leaders from the Latino community. And instead of talking about policy, he diverts into a Seinfeld episode that makes him feel better about his sort of generalized racial feelings about hot-blooded romantic Latinos, and then reads them a love poem. And meanwhile, when he is talking about policy, generalizes from that hot-blooded romantic Latino stereotype that he's got to say, I'm sure you agree with me on abortion. Right. I mean, the distance between policy and image here is a distance that I'm not sure the Republican Party has the depth perception to pick up. And I don't know when that starts to change.
Well, the party clearly doesn't understand it, and and those who in the party who do understand it either don't want to change it or don't know how to change it. I mean, look, Marco Rubio understands some of the stuff, right? He understands, for example, that the party has to change its tune on immigration in a major way as a threshold issue to this group of voters, but he can't get that message through. And from Rand Paul's speech and the whole setting and the way it was delivered and the topics he covered, he clearly doesn't get it at all. So his own fumbling attempts at going somewhere on immigration, which really didn't lead any place, have to be just totally discounted because clearly the man doesn't know where he is when he's talking to Latino voters, and he doesn't have a clue.
Well, while this is happening on the Republican side, and I think the thing that's maybe most important about it is that this is their highest priority. This is what they're working on the hardest, and this is how it's coming out. But are they making such fools of themselves that the Democratic Party is in danger of just sitting back and popping popcorn and watching them doing this? And the Democratic Party may not feel like it has to work to continue to court the Latino vote, to cultivate Latino leaders, which are few and far between in top-tier Democratic Party politics, and to make sure they hustle to get, for example, immigration reform actually done.
Well, absolutely, Rachel. And given the politics of the matter right now, why would Democrats do anything but just sit back and pop the popcorn? Because Republicans are doing such a good job of setting themselves back as opposed to forward in their relations with Latino voters. But you raise an important point. It takes the onus off of Democrats to demonstrate, to actually be what they claim to be, representatives of this fast-growing community, largest minority community in the country, and to move forward on immigration reform and take what for some Democratic senators, for example, might be seen as a tough vote. But arms need to be twisted. Votes need to be taken, and because this is something the country needs.
Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post, MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson. Gene, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it on Friday before Easter. Thanks a lot, man.
De nada.
All right.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. We do not give up. Expect surprises. Subscribe.